What is up, everybody? It's Animac here for AnimeUproar, and today I will be talking about the tragic life of Escanor, including his full backstory that has just recently been revealed in chapter 327.5 of the manga, and which ended up being a 40-page Escanor side story. This side story fills in a lot of the gaps in Escanor's backstory, including how exactly he met the rest of the sins and how he decided to join the 7 deadly sins in the first place. We also learned more about Escanor's connection to Merlin, and I believe that this Escanor side story actually offers some very important clues about what is going to happen next in the main story itself. For that reason, I had to dedicate a full video to the tragic past of Escanor and how his conflicting personality and his incredible power shaped him into the man who he is today. Into the man who would sacrifice everything for his friends, even when this might not be the smartest thing to do. If you enjoy the 7 Deadly Sins content on this channel, please leave a like to let me know. And if you happen to be new to AnimeUproar, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. With the way YouTube works now, if you don't make sure to turn on all notifications, you will definitely miss a lot of our videos. Finally, please be aware that this video will be dealing with the latest information we have about Escanor and his backstory, so there will definitely be some manga spoilers. With that said, proceed with caution, you have been warned. For quite some time we've known bits and pieces about Escanor's past, but now, thanks to chapter 327.5, we've finally gotten a more full account of his backstory, including how he became a member of the 7 deadly sins. Escanor's side story begins with him detained and on trial in the kingdom of Leonis. He is charged with terrorizing towns and villages, beating up a bunch of the holy knights, including Zaratras, and being arrogant and disrespectful towards King Bartra. By the way, is that His Excellency Lord Twigo-sama Senpai Sensei himself next to the other holy knights? Did I or did I not tell you that Lord Twigo will be appearing again in the 7 Deadly Sins story? It was written. Anyway, Escanor is eventually sentenced to 1,000 lashes and death for his crimes. Apparently sentencing him to death was not enough, so they had to whip him first. Since the trial is taking place at night, the man who has been sentenced is a frail and scared-looking nighttime Escanor. The holy knights in attendance cannot believe that this is the same man who caused all that havoc throughout the kingdom. Escanor tries to explain that a monster had been terrorizing the towns and villages in question, and he was actually the one who defeated the monster. But because he was in his massive daytime form at the time, the villagers thought that Escanor was a monster himself and they were terrified of him, so they reported that he was a monster. However, in a sad turn of events, even though Escanor knows that he had been unfairly charged, he does not object. He says that the court should just kill him. But Meliodas shows up and he objects. Meliodas takes Escanor to the headquarters of the 7 Deadly Sins, where he introduces him to the other sins, and he declares that Escanor will be the 7th and final sin. Again, because this is all still taking place at night, Escanor looks like an incredibly weak human with a minuscule power level of 15. So Bon, King, and the other sins can't believe that this is the famous 7th sin. But regardless of the fact that he appears to be just an extremely weak human, Meliodas welcomes Escanor into the 7 Deadly Sins. As the sins introduce themselves to Escanor and discuss their various powers and abilities, Escanor's current form seems very underwhelming by comparison. By the way, I found it funny how even at this point many years ago, King was totally in love with Diane and he kept acting all jealous about Escanor potentially staring at her bosom. You gotta respect King's commitment. The man has spent decades in the friend zone, but he has now finally emerged from his shell, grown a pair of wings, and summoned the courage to propose marriage to Diane. Very cool, King. Very cool. Once Merlin is introduced to Escanor as the most powerful wizard in Britannia, Escanor notices right away that she looks a lot like Rosa, the woman who had helped him escape persecution back when he was still a child in his home kingdom of Castellio. By the way, Merlin's choice of evening wear in this scene is on point. No wonder Escanor fell in love with her so hard when this is how she welcomes him into the 7 Deadly Sins. Merlin remarks that she and Meliodas had already met Escanor once before, but back then he was in his daytime form, and when they asked him to join the 7 Deadly Sins, he just laughed at them and turned away. This was the scene that we already got to see in the anime, the scene in which Merlin and Meliodas come across Escanor right after he defeated an actual monster. However, even though he defeated the monster in order to protect the villagers, The villagers were still all scared of him because of his immense power and arrogance, and in the end he ended up on trial instead of getting a medal for saving everyone. Ban is still confused about why Escanor was chosen despite appearing to be so weak, so he starts pressing Escanor about what his combat specialty is. Ban is assuming that if Merlin and Meliodas decided to invite Escanor to become one of them, he must have some special power or ability that makes him a worthy member of the 7 deadly sins. But Escanor merely responds by saying that his specialty is poetry, which is in itself pretty hilarious. I mean, that's kind of like a new guy coming to train with you for a heavyweight UFC championship, and when you ask him what his fighting style is, he just says poetry. Then, in classic 7 Deadly Sins fashion, everyone decides to celebrate that all 7 sins are now assembled by getting drunk. But once the other sins are fast asleep from the booze, Escanor tries to run away. As he begins to recite a dramatic poem about his lonely departure, Merlin appears beside him and asks him why he is leaving. A surprised Escanor explains that the form she and Meliodas had seen earlier, his daytime form, is a curse that results in him losing all reason and becoming strong far beyond his control. Escanor is afraid that if he stays with the sins, he will just end up hurting one of them one day when he loses control of his powers. And he says that it would have been better if he had never been born or if he had died that day instead of letting Rosa save his miserable life. At this point, we really have to acknowledge that Escanor has lived a hard and tragic life. As much as this younger nighttime Escanor appears to be the polar opposite of the confident and supremely powerful daytime Escanor that we know and love, we have to try and understand Escanor's personality and where his profound inner conflict is coming from. Escanor is, at his core, a kind and sensitive soul, a poet and a romantic who doesn't want to hurt anyone. Nevertheless, as a result of his immense power, a power that chose him and that he inherited through no fault of his own, Escanor tends to lose control of himself and he becomes incredibly strong and arrogant during the day, so much so that he is capable of leveling entire villages and mountains if he gets upset. Escanor, being the kind and sensitive person that he is profoundly afraid that he is going to hurt innocent people, or even people that he cares about, while in his daytime form. And Escanor feels that if he does end up hurting someone he cares about, he simply will not be able to live with that tragedy on his conscience. He would rather die if that means that he will no longer be a threat to anyone than go on living and risk hurting innocent people. Merlin tells Escanor that he is really an interesting man, and this makes Escanor blush. Meliodas approaches just as the sun begins to rise, and he reassures Escanor that he doesn't have to worry. The sins are not weak, and he doesn't have to worry about hurting them. In fact, Meliodas invites Escanor to let him test out his daytime strength, but Escanor is already beginning to transform, and he warns Meliodas that if he comes any closer, he can't guarantee that Meliodas will survive. But Meliodas just laughs in his classic Meliodas style, and he approaches Escanor anyway. In the very next moment, Meliodas is sent flying and he rams into Ban, and both of them splatter against the wall. Daytime Escanor freaks out and runs away. He rushes up into the mountains and starts smashing one of the mountains with his fists, begging for someone to stop him and put an end to his accursed life before he hurts more people. You can't help but feel heartbroken for Escanor at this point. He has to live with this power that he didn't choose to have, and this power forces him to be alone all the time, because most people are terrified of him. And those who are not terrified might end up being hurt by him even if he doesn't want to hurt them. This is killing Escanor on the inside because he is not some ruthless, bloodthirsty warrior who loves to fight. He is a sensitive and kind-hearted poet who just wants to live his life in peace. Once night finally comes, an exhausted and miserable Escanor is sitting alone by the mountain that he had been smashing. Merlin approaches him and Escanor explains that this is why he has lived his life in isolation from others. This is why he lives with utter loneliness. Because everyone is afraid of him when he is in his daytime form, everyone sees him as a monster, and Escanor is constantly worried that he is going to lose control and hurt someone. Merlin suggests that they should work together in order to find a way to control Escanor's power, but Escanor is surprised that Merlin would be so nice to him after he just brutally murdered 2 of her friends, Meliodas and Ban. Merlin reminds Escanor of Rosa, not just by her appearance, but also how kind and nice she is towards him. Other than Rosa, Merlin is the only other person who was ever nice to him and thought of him as more than a monster. However, as Escanor laments about how he brutally murdered Ban and Meliodas even though they were Merlin's friends, Ban and Meliodas show up and ask him what he's talking about. At first, Escanor thinks that they are ghosts, and he wonders how they could possibly still be alive. Meliodas explains that Escanor is not the only so-called monster around here. every member of the 7 deadly sins is considered strange and monstrous in one way or another, every one of them has their own share of baggage and their own sins. Escanor is still miserable. He says that he never wanted this power, and the curse always leads to him destroying things and hurting people. Even his maid Rosa, the woman who had helped him escape the kingdom, was forced to become a traitor and to put herself in direct danger just to help him. Years after he first left, Escanor returned to the kingdom where he was born, but the entire kingdom was destroyed by barbarians and Rosa was nowhere to be found. Merlin then offers to use her magic to allow Escanor to speak to Rosa once again, but Escanor says that he doesn't want to because he can't even look her in the eye. Escanor is sure that she now hates him because she went through hell because of him, and he says that Rosa would probably be happier if he was dead. At this point, Bon has had enough. He grabs Escanor, tells him to get a grip, and basically scolds him for just feeling sorry for himself all the time instead of taking control of his life. Meliodas decides to bargain with Escanor by inviting him to have a match with him the next day at noon. The fight between them will be a gentleman's wager. If Meliodas can win the fight against Escanor at his strongest, then Escanor has to agree to join the 7 deadly sins. But if Escanor wins, then he can do whatever he wants and he can run away from the sins if that's what he chooses to do. Meliodas and Escanor begin their fight at high noon with Escanor in his colossal The One form. Escanor gains the upper hand at first, pounding the much smaller Meliodas with his massive fists. But Meliodas proceeds to activate his demon powers. He goes into assault mode and he overpowers Escanor. As he forces Escanor down to the ground, he tells him that if he really wants to die, Meliodas will snuff out his life right there on the spot. Escanor is shocked that he can actually feel pain, even in his The One form, and Meliodas explains that he can feel pain because he is alive, and he is alive because Rosa chose to protect him at the risk of her own life. Escanor's life is not his own. Thinking that his life is not worth living is selfish and conceited. Clearly, Rosa thought that he was worth saving and she was willing to risk everything to save him, so by constantly sulking about his existence, Escanor is actually dishonoring Rosa's sacrifice. After Meliodas finishes his speech, Escanor says that yes, he still wants to live and he wants to speak with Rosa one more time with Merlin's help. Meliodas adds that if Escanor ever finds himself in a situation where he can't control himself in the future, Meliodas will be there to take care of that for him. Essentially, Meliodas is saying that he will stop Escanor before he does serious damage to himself or others, and this is an important point. Remember this because I will return to it later. Merlin succeeds in reuniting Escanor with Rosa, but they don't end up meeting in Britannia, although Escanor doesn't seem fully aware of where they are. In reality, Merlin allows Escanor's consciousness to meet with Rosa in the afterlife, inside the capital of the dead. This confirms that Rosa died sometime after Escanor left his home kingdom, perhaps during the barbarian invasion. Escanor thanks Rosa for protecting him all those years ago, and he promises to live his life to the fullest in order to honor her sacrifice. Escanor promises to do the right thing by Rosa, no matter how lonely and awkward he might be, and Rosa tells him that he has always done right by her and that he doesn't need to feel alone anymore. This reunion is truly a heartwarming moment, but it is also a sad moment because Escanor doesn't seem to realize why Rosa hasn't aged and why she has been watching over him this whole time. Escanor doesn't seem to realize that Rosa is dead. Nevertheless, he promises Rosa that even though he almost abandoned this life, he is now going to devote his life to his precious friends. And now we know what promise Escanor was talking about back in chapter 327. It seems that he wasn't talking about a promise he made to Mael or Meliodas, which are the two options that I was thinking of when I first read the chapter. Rather, he seems to be referring to the promise he made to Rosa, the promise about dedicating his life to his friends, and this reinforces the possibility that Escanor may be intending to sacrifice his life for his friends in the fight against the Demon King. But if this is Escanor's plan, it would go against the main lesson that has been so prevalent in this side story. The idea that Escanor cannot abandon his life so easily, that he must live on in order to honor the sacrifice that Rosa made for him. So, is Escanor really about to push his body to the breaking point in order to reach a state beyond the One and defeat the Demon King? Is this decision going to actually cost him his life in the end? Or is Escanor going to survive thanks to the help of his friends, the Sins? Remember the scene from the side story that I talked about earlier? The scene in which Meliodas defeats Escanor and then tells him that if he ever loses control, Meliodas will be there to stop him from going berserk and hurting himself or others. I can't help but think that this might be foreshadowing for what is about to happen next in the epic fight against the Demon King. Is Meliodas going to realize that Escanor is pushing himself too far and that he is about to die? And is Meliodas then going to use his full Demon Lord powers to knock Escanor out in order to save him from himself? Escanor seems determined to give up his life for his friends, but as we saw in the side story, Escanor's friends don't want Escanor to die. They want him to live, and I wonder if the only way to stop Escanor from overdoing it will be to literally knock him out in the middle of the fight against the Demon King. We will have to wait and see. But to me, the main message of the side story is that Escanor needs to value his life more and that he needs to be willing to rely on his friends. He seems to always want to protect others at his own expense, but perhaps the wiser strategy would be to work together with his friends instead of sacrificing his own life in a one-on-one battle with the Demon King. I have to say that I truly appreciate Escanor as a character, including the dichotomy between his daytime and nighttime personalities, and the fact that this power that he received through no fault of his own, the Divine Grace Sunshine, might be a blessing in the sense that it makes him probably the strongest human who has ever lived, but it is also a curse because it condemned him to a life of loneliness and misery, at least in the early stages of his life before he met the sins. On the one hand, we have a daytime Escanor who says that kings are as plentiful as grains of sand, but there is only one Escanor. And on the other hand, we have a nighttime Escanor who doesn't even think that he deserves to live, at least at first. Escanor's life has been tragic in so many ways, but the one bright spot in his life has been Merlin and the other sins, his precious friends. He now seems committed to sacrificing himself for his friends, and that may lead to the tragic end of his life. But I have a feeling that his friends will step in, and especially Meliodas, in order to stop Escanor from sacrificing himself. I certainly hope that Escanor survives, because after everything that we know about his tragic past, he deserves a happy ending. His plan might be to give up his life for his friends, but I hope his plan fails or changes because I want to see Escanor live, and to be completely honest, I want to see the relationship between Escanor and Merlin develop. In the side story, it is implied that Merlin is also lonely, that she has lonely eyes, just like Rosa and Escanor. We don't actually know a lot about Merlin's past, and we really need a side story for her too in order to learn more about her. But I have always been rooting for Merlin and Escanor to end up together. I think their personalities would complement each other well, and I think that after living in loneliness for such a long time, they both deserve to be happy together. In conclusion, even though Escanor has led a tragic life, and even though there are clues to suggest that Escanor might be about to give up his life for his friends, I really hope that Escanor will have a happy ending rather than a tragic one. But let me know what you guys think. Is Escanor about to push himself too far and die? Or is something else going to happen? Let me know down in the comments. I always love hearing from you. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more 7 Deadly Sins content right here on the channel, please leave a like to let me know. And if you happen to be new to AnimeUproar, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. Feel free to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at AnimeUproar for all the latest 7 Deadly Sins news and updates, including news about the new season of the anime. I want to give a big thank you to all of our AnimeUproar patrons for making videos like this one possible. Special thanks to our Pro Hero tier patrons, including the one and only Gilgamesh, Nothing But a Fan, Jason Wilson, King Zeldris, Angel Cruz, Steelers, Poet Pablo, Atropos Wraith, and Fididala Beat. And also an epic thank you to all of our The One tier patrons, the ones who stand above all other clans, including Ingrata, Alolanatum, Matty Mac, and Mako Takun. If you enjoy our videos and you feel that they provide value for you, consider supporting us on Patreon. Even a single $1 will give you access to our patron-only Discord. And to show our gratitude, your name will appear in our videos along with these amazing people. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys.